There's a movement brewing, and that movement is the MeTotal lifestyle.
It centers around you keeping your sense of self intact and in gaining clarity of purpose as you age. I'm Kary.
I'm Joe.
I'm JM.
And we're on a mission to show you how to enjoy friends, fellowship, and life without substance dependence.
It's time to discover how you can begin living a MeTotal lifestyle.
Right here on the FUZZEE'ish podcast. Let's go.
Welcome back, everybody. Episode 2 of the FUZZEE'ish podcast. Super excited to continue the conversation around MeTotal. It's been something that the three of us have shared in our sort of close communities over the last few months, but are finally in a position now to start to put it out for the world and to drive the community that we're really interested in driving around this whole MeTotal movement. So one of the things that's most exciting for me as part of this team is the fact that the group on this show are friends of ours from going way back, early ages till now. And so today we're fortunate enough to click into our guy Kary's story. Kary has been a friend of mine for over 30 years, going back to early childhood basketball to the one good throw I made varsity football. It was like an 85-yard touchdown pass to my guy Kary, number 8, to the house. I think we lost by 1,000,000, but that's a memory I'll never forget. And then he's been a guy that's not only been encouraging in my walk of MeTotal, but also supportive, and also has allowed me to really share in a super transparent and vulnerable place, and always just come back with positive energy and enforcement for my path forward. He's able to do that because his story is pretty incredible in its own right. He's been on this movement for thousands of days, while some of us are still chasing the next 100. So it's my pleasure to kick off episode 2 in our click into Kary's story. So thanks for sharing with us today, Kary.
Oh, thanks for that awesome intro.
So Kary, I was scrolling through social media the other day, and I came across a post of you when you were like 20 years old with your shirt off, looking like you were dancing.
Damn, those abs! Oh my gosh,
looking like you were dancing at a music festival.
Yeah, it's some sort of like 10 pack or something, and all the way up to his chest.
But you've been doing this whole thing.
I wasn't born with those physical gifts. Goodness gracious. But for real, man, maybe we can pop a video. Maybe we can get that into the video.
Maybe we can. J. Emmanuel,
too short of a 12 pack.
J. Emmanuel, let's think about you two.
I think I had a keg about that point.
I definitely had a couple of jelly rolls at that point. But Kary, so you've been doing this whole thing where you've been posting pictures of yourself when you were at the height of your consumption days, and then really long form copy to kind of, document the moment, give your kind of postscript perspective on things now that you've become more enlightened as a human being and stuff like that. Walk us through, give us a little bit of an abridged version of your walk with being alcohol free, but just kind of get into the story a little bit, maybe starting off from that point. Like what does it mean to you now, looking back all these years later? Like maybe you start with like the feeling and then kind of get into where it came from.
Yeah, I really appreciate that question, Joe. Yeah, that was 2005. Wow, it seems like a lifetime ago. But yeah, it was an interesting time because
that was when the 10 pack.
It's interesting though, because I was like in the darkest, most depressed, most isolated space I think I've ever been in, but I still had the whatever you call it, 10 pack.
Yeah, so you still went to the beach when you were in Florida, and the girls were like, "Oh, dang, let me go talk to that cat."
That's what's so interesting though, because I think because I was fairly athletic in high school and just still had a pretty regular regimen, I started skateboarding around this time. I wasn't really eating healthy. I was doing a lot of coke at the time. So it's like, it's not like I was living a healthy life. I think my body, and I think too that the society we live in, if you look at things like you see someone with a 6-pack and big pecs and you think they're living this healthy lifestyle. But when you really get behind the curtain, it's like, what are you eating? Like, how much rest do you get? Like, what kind of media are you taking in? Like, yeah, like what are you into? So I think it's funny. And again, man, I'm not the type of person that's just posting stuff with my shirt off. Like if people do that, that's cool. But I've just never
You should have, man.
never
You
been that
should've.
dude.
You could have done all right.
That's low hanging fruit. That's low hanging
coulda
fruit, man.
done
I got
aight.
substance, you know. I want
Yeah,
people to
okay.
get down to the
All
roots,
right,
you know.
I'm here for that too.
Speaking about cocaine, while we're on the topic, I saw on Huberman Labs podcast that taking a cold shower is 3 times more dopamine released than doing coke. So there you go.
Ooh, wow. I believe that 100%.
I wish you would have known that back in 2005, but here we are.
Cocaine's just easier to consume than a cold shower.
Yeah, cold shower is tough for sure.
Oh
Cold
man,
shower
but
is tough.
just to give a little more perspective, I mean, I was in film school and I was taking some time off because my financial aid at the time, it got kind of screwed up and I wasn't being responsible with my money because I was partying. But yeah, I had some housemates who made it really easy to do cocaine and do other stuff. I also worked in a restaurant where, you know, after my shift, I would be able to have a drink or a shot or whatever, don't smoke cigarettes, whatever. So for about a year and a half, I was in film school, but you know, a lot of my lifestyle, because I'm like, oh, I'm in film school and in Hollywood, people go out, like they network, like they're drinking, they're partying, like this is the lifestyle. So I think for me, I had this impression that's what I was supposed to do. And I justified it because I wouldn't meet people. I wouldn't remember most of what I talked about, or they wouldn't remember talking to me, but this was just my life for about a year and a half. So
how terrible is that, by the way? How terrible is that? Waking up the next day and thinking, oh shit, I said something. I know what it is. I can't really ask. Yeah, no, I hear you
like,
on that.
I mean, and it happened a lot. It happened a lot. It became a part of the lifestyle. So if I think for me, man, like when that time came for that picture, really good friend of mine, Darren, you guys know Darren, reached out. He's like, yo, I'm coming down to Florida for a winter music conference. I know you're in Orlando. We can come pick you up. It was him, and Darren was in a band at this time. It was him and his drummer who were coming down. I'm like, yo, yeah, pick me up. And, you know, Darren and I had some heart to hearts, and, you know, I wasn't vulnerable enough to talk about like, you know, my coke addiction and my alcohol addiction and my depression. And I mean, I say I was celibate during that time, but I just didn't feel attractive. Like I just felt like my self-esteem was really low. Like I would go out and I would meet women, but you know, I didn't have my own place. Like I said, I didn't have a car, didn't really have any money. And yeah, I was depressed, you know, and I think people say, I mean, when you're depressed, you can have the whole world in front of you, but if your energy isn't there, if your cup isn't full, there's no way for you to really embrace that. So
if you aren't feeling who you are, it doesn't matter. Right. Just like we talked about with the empathy thing. It's just like anything else. I feel you.
It doesn't matter. And
that's
I mean,
why
I think
people with me. Yep.
100%. I mean, we've seen it play out in society so many times where, you know, someone has this life on the surface that looks amazing. And then they take their lives or they overdose or, you know, they end up, you know, really just sort of spinning out. And it's unfortunate. But I think just kind of going back, I had a chance to talk to Darren about, you know, some things that they weren't as deep, but they were as deep as I knew how to go at the time. So he knew that I was going through some stuff, and always been a huge fan of music, electronic music. I love dancing. And I was just starting to get into like electronic music, like more like drum and bass kind of stuff, like Ronnie Size, LTJ Bookham to be precise. But there was this like drum and bass tent, and I don't know what it was, man, but the DJ just started dropping these records. And like I said, I hadn't been dancing. I hadn't really been out. Like I just hadn't really expressed myself in over a year and a half. And I mean, I think I just got on the dance floor, and 4 hours later, I was like dehydrated. Like that picture, I didn't even know that picture was being taken. Like that's how in the zone I was, you know? So I think for me, it was just maybe my physiology was just trying to express sort of this new metamorphosis of myself, because I felt like after that festival, I was talking to Darren and he's like, yo, I'm moving to Baltimore. We're going to start our band. Like, we're going to get a place. Like, you can move in with us. You'll have your own room. You know, it was just kind of that kind of situation. And I just made the decision in the car that I wasn't sure how I was going to make it work, but I just knew that, like, what is it? When you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, like that's when for some people, that's when you finally make the move. Like for you guys, I know you didn't have to get like rock bottom to really make that decision, but that's what it took for me. Or perhaps that's just the path that I had to go down to be able to share the journey today, you know?
Yeah. And perhaps like if you hadn't gotten to rock bottom, maybe your walk with being alcohol free wouldn't have stuck as well as it has, you know. So kudos to you, man. That's
was
awesome.
it soon after that? Was it soon after that picture was taken that you decided to put it all down? How much longer was it, and what was the
bro? I mean, in 2005, I still wasn't really meditating. I mean, I'd read like some Alan Watts stuff. I'd read, you know, some Deepak Chopra stuff. I was starting to sort of go down this kind of mystical path. But no, man, I mean, I started meditating in 2008. So 2005 is when I left Florida to go to Baltimore. I moved to Portland in 2006. 2008 is when I got the download for meditation, but it was 2008 where I went to the Vipassana meditation, which was the 10-day retreat, which I'll talk about briefly. So 2005 to 2008. So just a lot. I mean, I was in Baltimore. I went to film school. I was starting to make short films and different videos. I was doing some nonprofit work with this youth organization and like taking them out on the streets and like putting together these public service announcements. Like it felt very gratifying, but there wasn't much pay. I was working in a restaurant, so I was still drinking, but I felt like I had a community. Like I felt like I had just some people around me who were, you know, I was near Johns Hopkins. I was hanging out with some Hopkins kids. So there was some, you know, some pretty bright people around me having some really intelligent conversations, started going down the rabbit hole, started learning how to philosophize a little more and critically think. And in 2008, you know, my drinking started getting bad again. Well, let me go back. So I was in Baltimore, and then I decided to move to Portland to pursue my film career. Like I said, was in film school, dropped out of film school twice, but I got the skill of filmmaking, which is ultimately what I wanted to do at the time. Like, you know, Robert Rodriguez was like really big. Like him and Tarantino were doing cool, like guerrilla stuff. Of course, Spike Lee's always been a pretty guerrilla filmmaker. So I'm like, I can do my own stuff. I don't need film school. So I dropped out. I was doing some research. I'm like, yo, I don't want to move to LA. Like, I feel like I would just be one of millions of people trying to make it. Didn't want to move to New York. Like, I love the East Coast, but I just didn't feel like New York would be the place for me. And there was this magazine that I used to read. I don't even think they publish it anymore. It's called Movie Maker
Word
Magazine.
Up Magazine?
But every
Word Up Magazine?
Movie Maker Magazine.
Oh, not you didn't used to read Word Up Magazine? Okay.
I mean, but not.
There's some lines
Word Up
about
Magazine
that.
was dead in 2000.
No, but
I was reading Word Up Magazine back in the early 90s.
There's a track about how somebody used to be reading Word Up Magazine. That's what I was going with, and neither of y'all motherfuckers realize.
Oh, no, I got it.
Moving on.
I'm being all like literal. I'm like Word Up I'm like trying to pinpoint. I got you. I picked it up. I got the reference.
Okay. Yeah. I'll try to do better. I'll try to do better next time.
Damn. Wow.
There's this dude.
That just went right over my head.
He had a stage name. It was Biggie. Anyways, all right, keep going, man. Sorry. You used to read the movie magazine.
I used to read the movie magazines.
Now you can't get it out of your head. I used to read.
No, I got it. Anyway, so I was reading Movie Maker magazine, and they would have like their top 10 cities to be a filmmaker. And every quarter, I would just look at it and check it out. And one particular issue, they just had Portland in there, like right. It was like at number 8 out of 10, and I'm like, I've never even heard of this city before. But it's next to Seattle, which I thought was a cool city because I was always like a Supersonics fan, really into like Sean Kim, Gary Payton. And I'm like, yo, it'd be cool. So me and this woman I was with, we moved to Portland. And again, just kind of got into this lifestyle. I started working in a restaurant to get on the inside of the film industry. I started acting. I started taking acting classes, and a lot of actors wait tables as well because that's just what you do. And I started booking work actually pretty quickly. But what I realized was, you know, if you book something, you may not get paid for 3 or 6 months, and you just have to be available. You know, like you can get a call from your agent the day of, like, yo, I've got this audition for this thing. And you're like, yo, I'm working right now. It's like, well, you want it or not? And I've just been the type of person, especially when I was young, that I just take chances. I've never really been afraid to take chances. As I've gotten older, I've become a little bit more conservative in the things that I do. But back then I'm just like, yo, I'll get another job. So I think for me, I just got to a point where I knew something had to shift and I didn't know what. So the universe just kind of put this situation in front of me. So 2008, I was at this bar and I was just having a drink. It was late. So I was working in this restaurant. I went to this restaurant after working, And yeah, I was just drinking, and I saw this woman there that I'd seen there before, and she's like, yeah, me and, you know, some of my friends were going to go to this after party. And I'm like, yo, like, I want to come, I want to hang out. So we go to this party. It's like 2 a.m. right now. I've already had a lot of beers, a lot of shots, probably took a couple hits of some other stuff. And we get to the party, and they start passing this bong around. And I'm like, I can handle myself. I took a couple hits. And the woman that I came there with was like, yo, I'm gonna leave. Like, are you gonna stay here? Like, what are you doing? And I'm like, yeah, I'll stay. There were just like a few other guys there. And I'm like, no, I'll stay. Like, I'm gonna leave shortly. So I don't know what happened, but like as soon as she left, it was just like a moment where I might have mentioned this before, but that movie Friday that came out back in the early 90s with, Ice Cube, Chris Tucker.
Every time I'm in the kitchen, you in the kitchen.
You in the kitchen. Eating all the food.
All the chitlins.
all
the collard greens, all the pig feet.
So good. So good, man. There's the scene where Smokey is like, hanging out with these gang members, and they're like smoking, and he's like hitting it real hard. I've been smoking since I was 2, but then he finds out it's like angel dust, like PCP or something, and he ends up, taking his shirt off, breakdancing in the street. And it wasn't that extreme, but it was pretty close. I'm not gonna go into super detail, man, but I just found myself in a situation where, end of the day, like I ended up with like no shirt on, running down a fire escape. Like that's just, I'll just leave it at that. It was a very like.
Hold on, time out though, because like I feel like this is a big deal. Like back in the day, it might have just been angel dust. Today, it could be fentanyl. Like there's crazy shit happening in the streets right now. Like I'm scared to death for my kids who are about to become teenagers in less than 10 years.
But anyway, it's been going on for a long time because my mom has a similar story to that one, Kary. Back in the day, Alexandria, Virginia, mid 70s, thought that it was like one of her first times too. And I don't know I don't know the result. I don't know about dancing in the street or down a fire, but I'm sure it was bad because she's steered clear ever since as well.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. Yeah.
Lottie Dottie.
Shout
out, holla.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know you guys talk. I mean, we talk a lot about how when people hear someone say sober, they're just like, "Oh man, what happened? Is everything okay? Like, did you lose your wife? Did you lose your job? Right. Like, what happened?" And again, I wouldn't say I'm the quintessential story because it's interesting. I think it depends on the community you grow up in. But for me, well, before I get off track, going back to just what you were saying, Joe, about the fentanyl. And my experience, I mean, if you're in a situation where you're already altered and you're smoking something, but then you don't even know what it is, I mean, like, first off, like just the situations I would put myself in when I was under the influence, it was just like, how can I find more? Like more. I forgot what movie it is, but the guy was like, how much money do you want to make? And he's like, more. Like he didn't even have an answer. It was just more. And I think for me, man, like that night really just, it shook me, like it scared me straight. So much to where like, I think I had like 1 beer in the fridge. Like I ran in the house and I just dumped it out. I'm like, I'm done with this shit. Like I'm done. And I took a couple days off. I took a couple days off from drinking consistently for probably several years at this point. And during the time off, I went to another restaurant, and I didn't go to that restaurant because I didn't go to that bar. I stayed away from that place because I didn't want to see any of those people for as long as I could not see them. It was not a good night. But I went to another restaurant. I'm like, I'm just gonna chill out. I'm gonna have a glass of wine. That's what I told myself. And I went, and I happened to overhear these 2 people who were sitting like behind me. It's like a bar, like what are those things called? The bench, the stools. We're sitting back to back. And I just overheard them talking about a friend of theirs that had just recently returned from this meditation retreat. And I just kind of went over to them because I was curious. They were just like, it was 10 days and it was silent and it wasn't too far and it was free and all these different things. So I got some more information and I went home and I just started looking it up, and I found that the place was pretty close. Like they had this ride share that you could join. I was like reading these precepts, which were essentially like, these are things that you have to abstain from. And essentially it's just like, killing anyone or like gossiping, like just moral things that they're saying, like, hey, if you're going to come and be in this space with us for 10 days, these are the things that we're asking you to lean into. And none of it seemed too hard. The biggest challenge for me was I knew if I were to go to they have this 10-day silent retreat. So I knew if I was going to go to this 10-day retreat, I was not going to be able to drink or consume like I wanted to consume. So I knew for me, which I was getting to earlier, was like, depending on the community you grow up in, you may not have access to like rehab. Like I have friends, depending on how they grew up, some of them talk about rehab like it's just like a normal thing. Rehab and therapy and rehab.
Right. Yep.
Those words didn't even exist.
Yeah.
Like they weren't even things that I even knew I had access to. So for me, you know, again, I think some of my addiction came from me like self-medicating, like just traumatic things that happen young in life. So drinking alcohol, overindulging in other things, I think was like therapy. Like it was like my way of like having perspective on myself, to have a conversation with myself, to just think more critically about something. Like it was my own therapy. So I'm like,
was it therapy, or was it more of an escape? Because sometimes like dealing with trauma is incredibly hard, and a lot of, especially alcohol, it's something that a lot of people do to mask the pain or avoid it altogether. Do you think it was, hey, this is opening up my third eye and letting me talk to and confront my fears and traumas? Or was this, hey, I can't deal with this because it's too hard, let me put it to the side?
Yeah, I love that reframe. I definitely feel like it was me masking emotion for sure. And I think it was like not even, like maybe not even running away from it, but I think just like not even knowing how to even face it, you know, so maybe hiding from it. You know, or just maybe trying to avoid it. Like this isn't rehab, but this could be the closest thing that I've ever experienced to like me really being face to face with myself without really any other distractions except for myself. I'm like, worst case scenario, like I lose my mind and they take me off somewhere. Like I'm like, I can handle that. I can handle that. So I sign up for this thing, a couple months go by, and like I'm not completely sober, but I've definitely, like, instead of going out and like participating in some of the activities that would cause me to stay till last call and then go somewhere else and then been partying until the sun comes up, I would be like, okay, I'm just going to buy a 6-pack and I'm just going to drink that here. You know, like I just tried to taper it down, and I just felt like I had a little bit more control. Like I wasn't drinking as much. And then when the time came for the Vipassana, I essentially just like had a few days where like I just completely detoxed and just didn't do anything. So I get down to the meditation retreat. It's 10 days. And when you first get there, they ask you to turn your phone in. This is way before smartphones, but they were getting smart. I think I had the BlackBerry Pearl. Like that phone was legit back then. But I turned that in.
Lit up little
Pearl thing.
Yeah,
it was legit. And they're just like, you know, while you're here, please refrain from looking at people, talking to people, you know, masturbation, like just like writing stuff. Like we just want you to meditate, eat, sleep, and reflect. Like that's it. The men are here, women are here, and it's 10 days. So the first couple days were the hardest for me because up until that point, I probably had only meditated for maybe just like a couple minutes at a time. And most of the time I would end up just falling asleep. Like I didn't really understand I wasn't experiencing the benefits of meditation. And I think I also thought it was supposed to feel like something, like people would describe their meditation experiences. And I'm like, I don't feel that at all. Or like someone asked me to like imagine something that's purple or green in my head. I'm like, bro, I don't see it. You know, like I've never been that person.
Yeah.
It's just not how my brain works. So I'm just like, I'll give this a shot, because a lot of people that I was starting to respect and read and really get into and who I was inspired by were just talking about this thing called meditation or mindfulness. So I'm like, yo, there's got to be something to this. Let me explore it. So a couple of days go by and I'm learning this type of meditation. I won't get too deep, but essentially Vipassana meditation is, it's sort of born out of, I guess you would say, a Buddhist philosophy, but it's really just a body scan meditation to where you're paying attention to your breath coming in and out of your nose. That's really all you're focusing on. But while you're doing that, like you find a position and it's encouraged that you don't move. So like if you get a scratch or if you need to move, like ideally you want to see how long can you sit, observe without allowing the outside body to interact with you, to interfere. Yeah. So it's an interesting practice if you can imagine, because as soon as you start to sit, everything that can possibly be uncomfortable starts to come up, you know? So like there's this really interesting game that starts to happen. And for me in my mind, to where after a couple of days, I'm like, yo, like this is this is almost equivalent to the urge that I feel when I want to drink or when I want to escape from something. It's just like something is uncomfortable. How can I alleviate the pain? So I'm going to drink another beer. I'm going to smoke another cigarette. I'm going to do another line, whatever. And what I found in this practice was when I was sitting and breathing, whenever I felt like, a huge spider was crawling on my face when there's nothing at all, like if I could just observe that and just sit with that, it would go away, and I found the more that I allowed it to just be a little uncomfortable for a minute, the faster it will go away versus me being like trying to avoid it or like act like it wasn't happening. Kind of like in Fight Club, there's that scene where Ed Norton's character, Brad Pitt's like sitting there with him. He's like holding his wrist and he pours the acid on his hand. And Ed Norton's character is like trying to find a happy place. He's like trying to imagine these penguins. And Brad Pitt, the Tyler Durden character, like keeps slapping him, saying, "No, get away from your happy place. Come here. Like this is the moment. This is where it is. This is where it is." He starts to feel that burn, and then he neutralizes it with the whatever it is. But that's what I really felt like I was starting to learn, was that the discomfort that I was feeling is always temporary. What was expanding it was me essentially like getting myself caught up in it instead of just letting it just sort of have its course. So I just felt like getting that practice and just learning how to become more of an observer of my thoughts and less of someone who feels like they have to participate in my thoughts. That has created a space for me in recovery and in sobriety to where when I look back on that picture, Joe, that you mentioned earlier, where my eyes are closed and I'm just like in this sort of trance state, I just feel like life doesn't necessarily get easier. Like people don't stop being people. It's more of a how do I choose to respond? And some people don't feel like they have a choice to respond. And I think I push back on that because I'm like, well, you feel like you don't have a choice because you're very, very close to your identity. But as you allow yourself that space to just move away from it just a little bit more, you just have a little bit more space between your identity and what's happening to just not let every single thing that's happening touch you or impact you. Things still trigger me. Things still come up for me. But I just feel because I've allowed myself the time to explore what it means to be alcohol free and find things that excite me and encourage me and inspire me to want to keep getting up every day and do things in the world. It's really been a gift. I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, I tell you, let's talk about that force field for a second. So I love everything that you said. I think, there's so many aspects of what you said that tie back to what we've already been starting to talk about specific to MeTotal, and the fact that like for you really to be able to do this, you had to find the right mindfulness, is your example, in order to have a better sense for who you are personally and who Kary is from a me perspective, in order to really be able to not just give your best to the world, but really interact with those around you. Right. And so that's actually an interesting perspective that I don't think we've talked much about, is it's just as much about being able to show up in the right frame in any interaction that you're having or in any sort of dialogue or communication. And whether that's eye contact or at a place like you talked about where you can't even have eye contact, or it's just the way you're talking. But that force field analogy at the end, that creation of space between what's coming in versus what's going out, that's something we should talk some more about. And I think that you just created, I think, something we'll tie back to specific to a lot of aspects of what MeTotal is, because shit, people say something or something happens wrong, or, somebody at work does something that pisses me off. To this day, I still immediately feel deflated by that to some degree, right? It's really hard not to have that impact you right off the jump. And so that the idea of taking that back to a mindfulness, or taking that back to a true level of gratitude specific to where you are as a human, whether that's emotionally or physically or financially or just familially or however that's said, Dude, that's big stuff, man, because that's where that's where this all starts. Becoming a better human so you can have better interactions. And if you can create that flab, that force field, that's a good place to start. You don't have much flab when you have 10-pack either, man. So
I was going to say flab.
You had to do it with your mind, not you had to do it with your. For you had to carve it out in your mind because you didn't have no flab to put forward specific to that shit, man. Me, on the other hand, I had plenty. I promise, still do.
I love also how you talked about meditation kind of allowing you to kind of see things from an outsider's perspective. And one area where I felt like your story started to take a turn for the better was when you started to like tell yourself that it's not going to get easier, but you kind of came to terms with that. And I started thinking about that in relation to another conversation I had with my son the other day, he's 6 years old, but JM could probably tell you a couple things about this at that stage. They're constantly in this pursuit of trying to figure out what's fair between them and their siblings.
Oh, yeah.
And I just told him straight up, I was like, this is what you need to know. Life is not fair. And the sooner you realize that and you use it to your advantage, the stronger you're going to be. And I truly believe that that's maybe the unlock you had in your brain when you were thinking about life's not going to get any easier, but that's okay. Like I actually, when I think about myself and my proxy to MeTotal, I like the challenges. When you see all these people out there, you see people talking about fitness, weight loss, career goals, career growth, all that kind of stuff. Nothing is given to you. It's always about your mindset. Money.
Everything is about money. Yes.
Well, but how do you get money?
I'm just saying, like everything ties back. It just seems like this world, and we were talking about the fire hose of content at us at all times in every format, on every platform, in every variation. It all ties back to success. And you see some of the most recent polls of millennials and even some Gen Z of what their goals or objectives are as humans: to be famous and to be rich. Those are the two things. Right. And guess what? Neither of those things come easy. Most of them only come as a result of some in-depth process that includes a very strict mindset and the way you let yourself use things to fuel your energy. You have to use negative pathways. You have to use unfairness. You have to use all the shit that life throws at you to put it in front of you and achieve. You have to overcome. And the sooner you realize that, the better you're going to be.
Yeah. And as you two were talking, I was just going to say, JM, you were saying, people want to be rich and famous. And as you were saying that, I'm like, imagine a world where people want to have, a strong mind and a humble heart. You know what I mean? Like those are the things that create the success. It's like, how come there's so much emphasis on, so let me just share this, just talking about the key being inside of yourself. And I was listening to something the other day, and the guy used this example of, let's say you're in your house and you drop your keys. It's dark and you drop your keys and you can't find your keys. So you close the door, you go outside because you see a street light, and you start looking underneath the street light for your keys because there's light. A friend of yours comes up and says, yo, what are you looking for? I'll help you find it. And you're like, my keys. So your friend's looking around and they're like, yo, where did you drop your keys? And you're like, well, I dropped them inside. And then your friend's like, well, yo, why are you looking for your keys outside? And then you're like, well, because there's light out here. I can't see inside, so I'm out here looking for my keys. And I think if you take that sort of roundabout way, I think when it comes to us looking for the answers, it's like for myself, I feel like I'm looking for who I am outside underneath the streetlight, when in all reality, who I am is inside the house in the dark. It's like, bro, I'm the light. Like, how do I generate the light so that I can see what's around me? And I just feel through this MeTotal lifestyle, it really gives us an opportunity to explore, how do we light our flame? How do we fill our cup? Yes, we want to surround ourselves around people who complement and fill our cup, but ultimately us being able to do that, I feel like that's the most important part of life, is being able to fill our own cup so we can fill other people's cups.
Yes. And so even think about what you just said, right? Everything is about being rich, famous, 10-pack like Kary has, handsome, all of our hair, on and on.
Flat bill hats, the superior
flat bill
brim,
hats, rope, old school rope, whatever, right? There's all this material and sort of superficial, just complete buzz around us at all times and noise. And what Kary said about what if it was about mindfulness or caring about others? The reality is, what if people just cared a little bit more about themselves? What if people just thought a little bit more about their own health and wellness and figured out the best way to go down a path of thinking towards being good with who they are? I bet you a lot more of the things around mindfulness, a lot more of the kindness that we all wish that people would show one another, a lot less of the conflict and just absolute atrocity that we continue to see in so many different cities around our country with guns and other things. We'd start to see that slowing down, because I would bet if you really looked into the people that are in these conflicts or the people that are actually executing these horrible, horrible things, they're not happy with who they are. There's something in there that that's obviously out of whack. And whether it's something around drinking or just finding that mindfulness, that's what this is all about. A place to talk comfortably about it and understand that it isn't easy, and that we all have to be a little bit more vulnerable in the way that we talk about it, or we're going to continue to keep it inside, and we're going to continue to see all these fucking conflicts that we continue to have to hear about on a daily basis. I mean, it is just so sad what this world is talking about these days and how much worse it seems to be getting on almost a daily basis. I want to help
people don't realize. What people don't realize, and some people are starting to, that's why you're seeing some of this content proliferate on social media, but time is the most scarce commodity in the entire universe, and we don't have enough of it, and we're always running out of it. So the more you can focus on your personal well-being and your personal health, the better it is, because that's just going to mean it's just going to mean time well spent while you're on this earth. And the less time you have, being clear in mind and clear in purpose, the poorer and more bankrupt you are.
Yeah, and the longer that you're in that world, the less of the legacy that Kary talked about earlier you're able to achieve, because you don't have any more time, and you've already created a legacy through the actions and behaviors over all those years. Kary, I got another kind of question for you specific to the mindfulness aspect. As you try to quantify the thousands of days that you've gone and the thousands of days that are still in front of you specific to this journey, what is it on a daily basis that if there was one thing that on a daily basis ties you back to your ability to execute on all the things you did right or not right the next day, but stay purposefully focused on MeTotal? What do you think that is?
Yeah, I love that question, man. I felt like I was sitting with that over the weekend, doing some reflecting, some inquiry. But for me, man, it's momentum. I feel for me, I've gone back and forth, walking the sobriety rope or the MeTotal rope for a big part of my life. And when I started to track my progress, me being able to say I've been sober for 4,070 days isn't a coincidence. I know how many days I've been sober for a reason. That momentum is what it really is, the foundation. And again, someone might say, well, I've only been sober for 1 hour or 1 day. And it's do you understand how excuse me, maybe that's not the word.
No, keep going.
Do
man.
people understand how
F-bombs
if
are
people
welcome.
understood how powerful 1 day was, once you understand how powerful 1 day is or 1 hour is, you don't question if 1 day is powerful compared to 4,070 days. It's that momentum is tremendous, and what it takes to build that, it's your character, it's who you are, it's what you stand for, So for me, it's JM, it's me being able to look myself in the eye and have love and grace and appreciation and be able to sleep well at night and not have these weird thoughts, because I've had integrity with myself. I've not only done what I said I'm going to do to the people out in the world, because I think for the most part people do that. It's those inner commitments that I feel we can break and no one will ever know. You know, so for me, it's like when it's all said and done, I want to have the least amount of those inner regrets as I possibly can, you know? So for me, the momentum and just the progress that I've made looking back on day one all the way to today is it's really what keeps me going. Last thing I'll say too is I've just found, again, there's one thing to be sober or to live, you know, in sobriety. But what I love about MeTotal and recovery is it's all encompassing in a way that allows you to really bring your whole self to the party, you know, right. Because I feel like you can abstain, but this fellowship, this community, this hearing stories, this sharing stories, this being in the space with people, like that's part of the healing process. Again, if you go back to like old school humans, like we were like in tribes and communities, like we're used to being in these networks. And I feel in this modern day society, especially now that things are much more remote and virtual, and we have these extremely smart phones that are amazing, we're getting further and further away from one another. So I think just that isolation can be dangerous. So again, being in recovery, living this MeTotal lifestyle reminds me that if I think about MeTotal as a triangle or a circle, it's just a pillar, you know, me being able to be in community and share and be able to take back, because it really does motivate me, man.
Isn't it? I mean, think about that. Even what you just said. There's nothing prescriptive about MeTotal. We're not here to prescribe your way to get to this life. We're not here to even tell you what it is that you're trying to achieve in feeling or emotion from taking a step down this journey. But what we're trying to create, going back to what you mentioned today, which I think was really cool, is this separation between the world and yourself so you can be that best person. Or Kary, in your analogy, and I like this, you can go to bed without those mental stressors or those anxieties of things that maybe other people don't realize you had done or that you're thinking about, that you have to live with as a person. And that has nothing to do with anybody but you, or in my case, me. And our ability to grasp that and understand that and get to a place, each of us, you know, as far as you've made it, to a pure comfort and solace in understanding or being able to quantify the difference between who you were 4,070 days ago versus who you are today on February 17th, 2023, versus where you're going to be February 23rd, 2027, right? And just think about if you can continue incrementally making a difference in relation to that buffer or to that sense of calmness, where you can go from here, since you've made such an enormous difference in this amount of time. It's pretty cool, you know, when you start to quantify it like that.
Thanks, all right, guys. I got one last question, and I'm gonna take the seriousness out of the conversation for a minute so we can land this plane softly. Kary, was it the MeTotal of it all that led to it, or was it the Portland of it all that led to the tying of the hoodie strap? Because I'm a very much a hoodie tire as well, but I want to know your perspective. Was you always doing this, or did MeTotal force you into this movement?
Like how you give me two choices.
Did it start in Portland, or did it start with MeTotal?
I mean, I almost feel like they're one and the same, man. But no, I definitely feel like I'd say MeTotal. I mean, I think Portland has influenced me, but
well, you said earlier that later on you stopped caring as much about what people thought. And I thought about that for a second, because when I started tying my hoodie ties, I was like, you know, I don't give a fuck who sees me tying this. It's more comfortable this way. I think things that like constrict and things that bind, I was like, it's just a nice little neat package. I like it like that, you know?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've turned people onto this. Like I'll show up in a meeting and I'll be like this, and someone will hit me up and be like, yo, I peeped that. And then I'll see them. And then they'll be doing it. And I'm just like, yo,
playa.
Stand out.
What's up, playa? And does the flat brim hat come along with that? Like as soon as you get to this, you have to go straight to, it makes sense.
Yeah.
There's
I'm not there yet.
I would love to be able to wear a hat that you make that hat look so good. Like that hat on my head.
It's the pumpkin head, man.
It looks terrible on my head.
I have no need for a hat with these headphones because my head is way big enough. But Yeah, I mean, I need a full crown, pumpkin style size rope hat, and that's why
I'm
I've
like,
got
damn,
several
there's a
of
lot of
basically
crown
the
in
same.
this hat. These are the kind of hats JM wears.
This hat would be covering Kary's eyes. Would be
That's like
resting on his nose.
the modern equivalent of a 10-gallon hat. Like
Oh, no doubt, it would be
Cowboys would wear
literally
back-
sitting on Kary's nose, no doubt.
And it's come time in this lovely edition of the FUZZEE'ish podcast for us to discuss the things around us that let us lead a more MeTotal lifestyle. And I'll kick us off today, and I will talk about a couple of items of literature that I've got on my desk that I peruse every once in a while to live a slightly better life. Number one, Prayers for Difficult Time for Men. I don't know why specifically for men, but I found this at an airport bookshop and I decided to pick it up in a moment when I was going through a tough time in my life. And I do refer back to that at probably at least once a month. The other one is
See what he's got.
Learn the Science of Losing the Weight by Noom, the Noom Mindset, which is an app that I've been utilizing to track my calories. And then I like history, and specifically I'm really interested in biblical history these days. So I found a Life magazine that talks about the 50 most important people in the Bible. And I've been trying to get familiar with those people on a deeper level other than just reading the random stuff. I don't really like the way the Bible's written sometimes, like the old prose and all that kind of stuff. So this makes me feel like I'm bringing, old biblical characters into a more modern context for myself so I can learn as I go. But that's my my MeTotal
drinking featherweight, religion heavyweight as it pertains to the FUZZEE'ish topic.
The Mike Tyson of
yeah. Well, we'll have to get Mike Guthrie on here sometime to talk about that.
Yeah, we go
we'll have to crown. After that, Kary and I will crown the heavyweight champion. So you better keep. And let me just tell you, you better keep reading and keep working on your knowledge, because that dude's got some wisdom that he can drop on you in regards to said topic. All right.
I mean, he still pings me every once in a while on Messenger, and we go after it. But all right.
I will say also the fact that this dude's got these quick hitters that he's got props all prepared for, Kary, kind of set us up for not looking quite as tight on it.
I'm in the bunker, man. This is the bunker. This is where I spend all my time. So
I'm like, damn, Joe, you got me over here.
Exactly. Joe's got Life magazines from 40 years ago and shit. We've been here just hoping for the best.
I got nothing over here, man. What am I going to show? I got my chapstick,
Exactly.
All right, who's next? Who wants to talk about their surroundings and bring something MeTotal forth?
Yeah, I mean, I'll do what we've talked about this a lot as a group. I continue to have products that help me live MeTotal. So today we'll go with Hoplark Hop Tea. This is basically water, tea, and hops, and it's delicious. It has some caffeine in it. So what's nice is no alcohol, gluten-free. I think 0 calories. You get to drink all day.
It genuinely tastes like an IPA. Alcohol. I love that stuff. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, as a guy who used to like to have a drink pretty much any time of the day, now I get to do so and enjoy the same flavors, but obviously maintain the MeTotal life that I've been fortunate enough to live for 530 days. So that's mine. Sorry, I don't have any Bible magazines to share, Joe, but that's what makes this group interesting.
I'll send you a couple of mail.
I'm good, man. As I mentioned, I got this other heavyweight in my life, so I'm good. I'm feeling welterweight on that, but solid enough. All right, Mr. Kary, what do you have to share today?
Yeah,
after going off video and scurrying around your apartment to find something.
I got 3 things. One is I've got these different plants over here. I think just plants in general, just seeing life, cleansing the air has always been cool. I wasn't much of a plant guy back in the day, but things changed. Speaking of plants, I've got this green water. It's like, I guess you would say like chlorophyll, like fulvic acid, some different minerals. Tastes really good. And then I just keep this Recovery Dharma book pretty close to me. I wouldn't even say it's like AA, but it's a It's a community that essentially is built on like more Buddhist principles around sobriety and recovery. And it's nice for me just to be able to pick it up and just read an excerpt and just be able to ponder on that for the day. So
yeah,
that's nice. What I got.
All right. Thanks again, everyone. What a great second episode. What a great example of where this conversation is headed. I think we got into some topics today that we'll continue to click into, particularly around building that barrier, that buffer between the noise of life and what truly is in your heart. And just really thankful for the vulnerability and the transparency, Kary, that you shared today. Everybody, we hope that you continue to subscribe to this message and where we're headed with this podcast. Please subscribe in the various channels that you can. Please share any comments or interests in what we talked about. We'd love to click into it further. And mostly, we are so excited to continue to share with you over the hundreds of episodes, as Joe likes to say, we have from here. So until then, take care.